Uh, Mr. Attorney, Councilman Dieguez, this is a public hearing. Anyone for the public wishing to speak on item 12A? Anyone for the public wishing to speak on item 12A? Going once, going twice? Closed. Councilman Dieguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is the item regarding the franchise fee restrictive ordinance. It sets numerous restrictions on any money that we're terming excess franchise fee money above half the fee as we expect it to be today. The projection, if you'll recall, was a total of 1.275. 1.275. So this is just to capture any money above the monthly amount of that, which is $106,250, that it go toward the outlined items. So that is what this is, and I move the item as it is presented.
I second.
Discussion. I have a question for Councilman Dieguez, then we'll go to Councilman
And I
Alvarez.
also had some amendments to make as well.
Councilman Dieguez.
My amendment was just two quick things, just to kind of harmonize everything. It's all to Exhibit A, because the rest I had already fleshed out with the town attorney. But in Exhibit A, Item 6, it says here toward the bottom of that paragraph, and that are allocated for the purposes outlined in paragraphs 1 through 4, that is incorrect since it should be 1 through 5. So that's one part of my amendment, just to reflect that we are including the stormwater. It was originally 1 through 4 when I was initially going to take that out, but if you'll recall our conversation, we left it in. The second change is simply to delete the language at the very top, the very first paragraph, the effective October 1st paragraph. Right after the dollar amount, $106,250, I wanted to delete whichever is greater. And just instead to add language to the effect of, but not to exceed $106,250 or $106,250. That is the amendment.
Motion fails.
I'll second. No.
Okay. Discussion, Councilman Rodriguez.
Obviously, I'm in agreement with these revisions. I think this was something that was put in place by Councilman Dieguez to ensure that whatever monies we receive in excess of the expected franchise fee be used for specific infrastructure projects. We've all discussed that we're in favor of this item, so I have nothing else to add.
Just for clarification, can you repeat the amendment just to make sure that we have it correctly over here?
Yes, sir. It was, and I'll work from the top down too, I guess, make it easier to follow. In the first paragraph, right after the dollar amount, $106,250, delete the language whichever is greater, and instead to add, but not to exceed $106,250,000. And then the second part of the amendment was item 6. The very second to last sentence or line, where it says outlined in paragraphs 1 through 4, it should actually say paragraphs 1 through 5. Oh, well, and actually I'd like to amend my amendment, because Councilman Rodriguez has pointed out to me that actually item 7 has the same error, Scrivener's error, which is, it says 1 through 4, but it should be 1 through 5. And I don't know if I need a second. I probably would need a second amendment to include that. Thank you.
So we're on the second amendment?
Well, I amended my amendment, so we're still in the same amendment. And it's just simply to encapsulate 7, which has the same error as number 6.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. We're back on to the amendment to the main motion, as amended.
Okay. So, yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions, but let me know if you have all that, Gina.
Only question to Councilman Dieguez, and I'm fine with this, I supported it before. How do you foresee this going forward, especially since we didn't go with a 6%, especially on those? I agree with this. I mean, we need to, I drove on 79th and 82nd today, and you see the need in some of those areas. So what are your thoughts on this moving forward?
I think the following. First and foremost, The franchise fee agreement is in place for 30 years. There may come a time, as the Vice Mayor has said, where we no longer can just avoid the conversation of whether we need to increase on the revenue side instead of just cutting from what's there. I mean, a lot of the funds that are currently in the budget that we say is money that's floating around are savings accounts, really. So I think this is necessary for the future because we don't know what future councils are going to do. I think that with the limitation of the $106,250, there is a potential for some money that would be captured by this ordinance for infrastructure, even if it might mean that nothing immediately takes place and we're inching our way there. And further, I think that if you look at at some of the language that we've thrown in here, again, it is still pretty restrictive from the standpoint that, for example, take item 7 from the exhibit. Funding levels for the projects listed in paragraphs 1 through 5 as they exist in fiscal year 2018-19 must be maintained from sources other than excess franchise fee revenue. So that kind of helps to, in my view, helps to ensure that those items stay funded at the same level. I mean, obviously with the language about excess franchise fee revenue, we'll see how that plays out, but I still think this is important. As you know me, Mr. Mayor, because you've known me for a few years now, and as everybody else knows, I am a person that likes to think long-term. I don't like to react to things. I'd rather be proactive, and that's what this is. And I think that's the simplest argument I can make in support of this. Thank you.
Good job. I'm fine with it. Councilman Rodriguez in closing.
Yep. I had one issue. Well, it's more to add to what Councilman Dieguez says, and the reason why this is still important to put on the books. The franchise fee that we voted on last time at the last meeting said that we would look at it from now until June to see if it was still possible for an increase if we determined that we did not feel that taking from our savings account and taking the sinking fund funds were in the best interest of the town. And I'm going to harp back to this. These are sources that we are taking money from ourselves and will not be able to pay ourselves back if we continue down this road. If we keep the 3% like we voted on and don't change it from now to June, we will not be able to pay ourselves back the $431,000 from the fund balance. We will not be able to pay ourselves back the $420,000 from the MLOP fund, and we will not be able to pay ourselves back the sinking fund deferral. So I think we have from now until June to take a hard look at it. I know Councilman Collazo mentioned that sometimes at the end of the year there's some additional monies. We can allocate that to start chipping away at making ourselves whole again. But I think this is still important because there's still a shot.
Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez. And this is on the amendment as amended to the main motion, correct? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. We're back onto the main motion as amended twice. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Item 12A, motion to approve as amended twice. Councilmember Dieguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Collazo.
Yes.
Councilmember Alvarez.
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Ruano.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mayor Sid.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We are on to ordinance in second reading, 12B. Mr. Attorney.
An ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Miami Lakes, Florida, amending Chapter 13, Land Development Code, at Article 11, Fees, at Section 13-2102, relating to variance application fees, including all notification costs in the variance fees of administrative variances, small project variances, and variances for single-family properties of less than 1/2 acre or 2,500 square feet, requiring all other variance applications to be cost recovery and providing for initial deposits, providing for a repeal of laws in conflict, providing for severability, providing for inclusion into the code, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. Councilman Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor. As many of you may know, this is an item that I brought before the Planning and Zoning Board when I was the chairman back in 2018. The reason I brought this up, and I thought it was important to have the staff look at it, was I found that we had some residents who were for lack of a better term, cost prohibited out of the variance process and forced, or not forced, what they ended up doing was just going ahead and doing their projects because they were being forced to pay a $1,700 variance fee to get a variance on a project that cost them anywhere from $300 to $600. So when I was approached by some of those residents as to the fees and to why they were so high, I proposed this item. The biggest issue that I had was smaller items like administrative, public fencing, driveways, decks, walkways, things that are usually not as expensive, would be reduced to a flat fee of $450 for the notification and recording costs. And then working with staff, we went through, and actually you guys should have an amended version of what was on the agenda. Do you guys have that? Okay. No, there was an amended version that was given before the meeting. Yeah. So if you look at the amended schedule, the fee schedule, section 2.2 is what I was talking about the public hearings for fences, driveways, decks, and walkways, in addition to administrative hearings. That's $450, and that's basically to cover the town's costs and expenses in relation to these hearings. For public hearings relating to single-family homes, they'll now be $1,250 instead of the $1,750, which $1,250 is the same amount that we were charging before, except we used to charge it as a $750 application fee and a $650 deposit to pay for publication, notifications, and recordings. So now it's just going to be a flat fee of $1,250, and then everything else is staying the same. With respect to multifamily, it's still $1,100 plus $650. For commercial industrial, it's $1,700 plus the $650. For signs, it's now $1,100 plus the $650. And the town rehearing of the P&Z board decisions, this was something that we took from the city of Coral Gables. They have an ordinance in their variance ordinance. They have it where it's, if you have to appeal the P&Z decision, then you have to put a deposit. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to pay $2,000, but you have to put a deposit, and if there's any additional costs incurred by the town for the rehearing, that it would be paid from that deposit. So I move to have the ordinance revised pursuant to the amended version that you received before the meeting.
I'll second.
Discussion, council. Councilman Quayle.
I want to compliment Councilman Rodriguez for looking at the fees or reanalyzing the fees. I know when I had my review with the manager, I felt some heartburn that, it looked like at the first tier, we did a great job of reducing that fee, and then the second tier didn't really give that same reduction. I'm glad that you worked with staff and brought back something that further reduced that amount, and I think it goes well to accomplish what you were trying to do the first go around. So I appreciate you working with them on that. Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
So I think this is a good item. I only have one issue with this item, and it's in regards to the deposit for the rehearing of P&Z board decisions. Today, I was a sponsor of that ordinance way back when that allowed a process for residents or businesses to have a rehearing under certain conditions. Unfortunately, the council at the time made those conditions very restrictive. I don't think anybody has ever qualified for a rehearing. I mean, it's to the point where we read it today. With the attorney and the manager and Tony Lopez, our deputy manager, I had to chuckle because it literally nobody. It's very restrictive. You almost have to go to court. So I almost feel that whoever, that one person that qualifies under ours shouldn't even have to put a deposit of $2,000. I think they almost should be applauded for making the appeal. If you read, I'm being honest with you, if you read that appeal process that we have, it is so restrict that it is almost impossible for anybody even to have a rehearing. No, nobody's ever had it. In the 3-4 years, there's never been a rehearing here in front of the council. So I almost feel that whoever goes before the council on a rehearing, they shouldn't have to put any deposit down. I mean, they're already out. Even if it's single-family home, $1,750. They're already out of pocket, and if it's being
$1,250.
reheard, there is a reason why. And I know it's just for cost recovery and all that, but I don't even think they should have to put any deposits. So if it's okay with the sponsor, and I hope it's a friendly amendment, but I want to waive I want to make a motion to amend the main motion to waive the $2,000 requirement, just based on understanding our rules, how restrictive they are.
I'll second your friendly amendment.
Sorry, thank you.
And actually, Mayor, I think this would be a good time. This would be a good time to look at that rehearing procedure, right? So we can sit down and actually see if we can make it a little bit more welcoming to our residents.
Do you want to, just so that you could bring the new council, since I think a lot of us weren't here when, just bring them up to speed real quick with how restrictive that portion is?
No, it is. We did take a look at that during our briefings today, and it is extremely restrictive measure. I mean, there's two ways that a person can go ahead and appeal a planning and zoning decision, and one of the methods is bringing it back before you. The other method is taking it to a court, the circuit court, and appeal it that way. But I believe that the original idea was that you, as the governing board of this town, would have the opportunity to rehear hearings, and so perhaps there's ways, and we discussed some of those possibilities. If there is, maybe it's not a unanimous vote, if it hasn't been voted by supermajority, that the person would then have a window to have it reheard before the town council. And what we can do is, if we get direction from you, is we can come back with something that you can consider as a mechanism for those P&Z hearings to be reheard in front of you.
So on the amendment to the main motion, yes, Councilman Krause.
I understand the purpose for the amendment, and you know, I think Mayor did a good job illustrating how difficult it is to kind of bring something back. But I think you just highlighted maybe we should do some work on it. Should we table the amendment until the work comes back, or we feel comfortable?
No, yeah, I think they're two different items. One of them is if we accept the amendment, we would just do a cost recovery analysis for rehearings and not require an additional deposit. So that's the way we would take care of that, and then we can look at the rehearing procedures under a separate motion. But then I wouldn't want to delay the process for the administrative, which is really the issue that we're trying to address here.
So in lieu of the 2,000, it's a cost recovery
It's pure cost recovery, yeah.
and a certificate from the mayor for accomplishing.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. We're back on to the main motion as amended. Any further discussion, council? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ordinance in second reading as amended, item 12B. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Collazo.
Yes.
Councilmember Ruano.
Yes.
Councilmember Alvarez.
Yes.
Councilmember Dieguez.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mayor Sid.
Yes.
Ordinance in second reading as amended passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We are on to the next we're on to resolutions. 13A, Mr. Attorney.
A resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Miami Lakes, Florida, approving a contract between the Town of Miami Lakes and Miami-Dade County for police services, providing for authority of town officials, providing for authority to expend budgeted funds, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. Mr. Manager.
Yes, this is something that was one of the first undertakings that I had when I first was appointed to the position under the leadership of Major Ruiz and our Deputy Town Manager, Tony Lopez. We came up with a strategy Internally, we started looking at the provisions in the current agreement, which, and we undertook we took a step that really had never, to my knowledge, had ever been done. We partnered with the other two cities that contract services from Miami-Dade Police, which is Cutler Bay and Palmetto Bay, and I mentioned that earlier. We took a look at the three contracts. We extracted from the three contracts the best provisions from each of the three contracts and developed a new template, a new master contract, and that is the what we presented to Miami-Dade Police. To their credit, they didn't balk at many things, and what you have before you is a new memo. If I'd like to point to you to the memo that we've just provided you, the numbers in your original memo in the last paragraph on page 2 of the memo were based on numbers before the ratification of a new collective bargaining agreement. So what you have there highlighted in yellow and with strike-throughs, those are the correct numbers, and they're more in line with what you'll see. In the budget, in addition to the 8.3, the 8.3 does not take into account overtime, so that's why your number in your budget will be different from here. But the 8.020 was based on numbers from the previous fiscal year, so that's why we've adjusted this and given this to you to put this into the record. But the series of bullets that start on page 1 and then continue on into page 2 are all of the enhancements that were presented in this new agreement. Some of the things are, for instance, for the watch orders, the physical checks are increased from once per shift to 2. We've lowered the average response time goal from 8 minutes down to 6.5. We've implemented an average response time goal for non-emergencies to 13 minutes. If you read down, there's several other provisions. Some of the other more important ones, we've reduced the maximum number of days that the police department has to fill vacancies from 120 to 90. We've added a favored nations clause in our agreement, so if any of the other cities negotiate a provision that is better than what we have in our agreement, that allows us to reopen that provision so we can renegotiate that with Miami-Dade Police. And it also implements the final bullet, like a status quo period, that if the town and the department are still in negotiations at the time that the agreement comes to its expiration date, that it doesn't automatically cease to exist. We would continue under a status quo period until one of the two sides either declares an impasse or there's an agreement between the two parties. So this is before you, and I recommend your approval.
Council, are there any motions? And then we'll get into discussion.
Motion.
Yeah, I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on this, Council? Councilman Dieguez.
Thank you. And Mr. Manager, just had a question regarding one of the bullet points as I was going through it. It's third from the last bullet point, 13.1, added a reasonable effort to use on-duty personnel for town events. Can you please just explain what that is trying to say?
Well, whenever possible, and it's something that the major has worked hard to do already. So, for instance, even like at several of our events, like Food and Wine and so forth, they'll have on-duty units in the area. You know, they're not tied to the event, but they're always in and around the event. However, if they get a call, they got to go. So it's not a hard and fast commitment, but they'll dedicate whenever possible on-duty units to some of our events. But obviously, if they get a call for service, an emergency call, they'll detach from the event and move on. But this is, it puts in writing things that basically were already happening.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. And I'll close just by correcting some statements that were made earlier that I think are a result of a misunderstanding of what is going on with respect to, it kind of ties more into the budget than to this, but I'll be very brief, which is that the officers that were added back into the budget, that's exactly what it was. It's not that we're hiring 2 additional officers, that we added those officers back. We became the 11th, correct me if I'm wrong, was the 11th safest city in Florida with that level of personnel, and I think it's important that we maintain that. And going with that, I'm very happy to support this memorandum. I think it definitely improves our emergency response times, as you can see from the second bullet point. And I do think as well, there are several other clauses here that work to the benefit of the town at large. So I'm 100% support of this, and I think our police do an excellent job, led by our town manager. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Councilman Diegues. Any further discussion on this, council? Nobody? I do have to say one thing. I am in favor of this. I think the manager did a great job, along with Tony and the major and everybody else involved. There's only one concern that I have, and it goes along the lines to what Councilman Diegues said previously, that we should have a long-term view. 2024, which sounds a little bit away, but it's 4 years, right? We're going to have a different system in the county. It's going to be an elected sheriff. Might be something, I mean, I know it's something to think about when we get there, but it might be something that's not going to be so good for us. Depending who gets elected, who doesn't get elected, you might have a sheriff that doesn't want it. So, although I'm in favor of this, I almost feel like we have to get prepared, you know, for that, maybe financially, mentally, just for that real life situation. Before it was just up in the air, but there will be an elected sheriff. It will be a political position in 4 years, and we don't know how that's going to work for us. We've seen it work throughout Florida in some places, and we've seen it work very poorly in big counties throughout the state too. So just something, food for thought, because with that long-term view, because it might be something, you know, that we might have to consider going on our own or with somebody else. So I just want to put it on the record, because that's a discussion. Although 4 years seem like a long ways off, you know, it's right around the corner. So, Councilman Alvarez.
So, Mayor, what you're alluding is to, we might have to, for the future, do a cost analysis of having our own municipality, our own police department, as opposed to contracting with Miami-Dade.
I don't want
Just
to.
for my clarification, but
I don't want to speculate, but the reality is we always stayed with the county because of its professionalism, because of everything that the county has and offers. You see it on officers here,
Right.
how amazing they are. But once you start having an elected sheriff, we've seen those issues nationally. We've seen those issues here, you know, that maybe those are things that we don't want. But I just want to put that food for thought, because that's a real reality. And the politics gets injected real fast, and now the promotions happen based on merit and different things, when at that point you're going to see.
has there ever been a cost analysis comparing, like for us, like our own municipal police department as compared to the county?
Yes, startup cost is the main issue. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I know some of you guys were here. That's been the main issue, startup costs. So,
Okay.
Vice Mayor.
Not just startup costs, but the long-term costs of training, having a temporary jail, a holding cell while the police reports are written, all the DUI equipment,
Sorry.
you know, the lawyers alone and the liability lawyers, a professional standards unit. I mean, the infrastructure that goes in. We have 4 civilians. We would have to have 20 civilians probably just to run a police department this size. So when we had that commission that looked at the police contract, I mean, it was an enormous amount. And if you look at even smaller cities like Miami Springs, their millage rate is 6-7% because they have their own police department. So right now, I think we have the best deal going right now, and the mayor's right. There's a point where politics could be interjected into there. I don't know how the budgeting is going to work for that. I think the county mayor still budgets to the police, and the sheriff has to work off of that, just like they do in Broward. But it's something that definitely is something that this council will have to look at, you know, in 2024 when the election comes, and see what the culture of that police department changes.
Just food for thought, but that's fine.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Very briefly along those lines, it was just to give a very quick history lesson for those who are not aware of why we even got away from an elected sheriff in the first place. There was the prior sheriff the last elected sheriff that we had was running a prostitution ring out of his office, was engaged in taking bribes, all sorts of issues. And, I'm not saying it's going to happen to every elected sheriff, as the mayor was saying, but these are things that the risk just goes higher, right, if you move to an elected position. So that's why I voted against the amendment when it was presented on the ballot last time, and that's why I 100% agree with you. We need to start looking ahead and getting ahead of the issue, if you will.
Thank you, Councilman Diegues. Councilman Collazo.
Thank you, Mayor, and I think you bring forward some wise points, and I know when this board last looked at this many, many moons ago, it was cost prohibitive for us to move forward and start our own police department. I think I brought an item forward last year, said, well, how can we look at this? Because it is the biggest chunk of our budget. It is the biggest thing that we spend, and it's probably the most important spend that we do, because we're number 4, the 4th safest municipality in the state of Florida. I think it's 11th, I'm sorry, and something that we're very, very proud of. But with that being said, I know when we were going to relook at this year, we didn't want politics to be injected into it, and I think that was the major speaking point of why the issue was denied. We didn't necessarily want to convene a group that was going to make this political, whether we should have a police department or not. Now that we're shifting gears, trying to forecast how politics might inject into this process, and we're trying to forecast what may happen, would it be wise for us to start setting up some preliminary meetings with the other municipalities that would be equally affected, and maybe start looking at a partnership to see if maybe by combining the 3 other municipalities, I'm sorry, is there 3 or 4 municipalities that are part of this contract?
It's total of 4, and the difficult thing is that geographically it doesn't make sense. It makes sense for Cutler Bay and Palmetto Bay because they're neighbors, for them to partner and maybe consider doing some type of joint venture in a police department, but with obviously with the geography discrepancy, we would either have to look at neighboring cities or establishing our own if there was some heartache with the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office.
I realize that geography plays a difficult role because we're not necessarily in the same area, but if we bundle resources, even though we might be separate from each other, we may be able to somehow chip away at that starting cost or that initial ramp-up cost, right? So if this is really something that you feel that warrants exploration, and we feel that out-of-the-box thinking sometimes get us the results that we need, I think maybe starting to look at this issue, right? Because we're going to need to do a lot of partnering if it's going to be coming 4 years, and we know we don't necessarily move that quickly. That might be an idea that we may take on. So I don't know if that's something that you're open to, Mayor, if that's something that maybe we can start providing some direction, to start having those discussions and see what we would do, right? What would these 4 cities do? And if these 4 cities are on board, maybe trying to combine the solution might be something that would help us moving forward.
In all honesty, council member, I think it's, and the mayor mentioned it, it may be really early for this discussion and really premature because obviously there are, I think, 67 counties in the state. 66 of them have elected mayors, and while the experience in Miami-Dade County was horrific, and that led to the abolition of the elected office, there are 66 counties in the state where an elected sheriff, it works. Some as close as right next door in Broward and Palm Beach. So there are, I wouldn't necessarily, it's happening, obviously, and just because it happens, I don't believe that it's the kiss of death. The professionalism and the departmental culture that exists today in the Miami-Dade Police Department will be things that an individual elected to the office will be almost impossible for one individual elected to completely, destroy that culture of professionalism that exists today. So it will be probably decades before any one person will be able to erode that culture that exists today. So I think we're going to be okay, but I would venture to say it's probably better to wait till it gets closer and the dynamics of how that's going to come into play are better in focus.
So then I'm just confused, then what did you mean by that it might not necessarily be positive for us?
So there might be, one of the main things that can happen is that the sheriff can unilaterally say, hey, I don't believe, there's county commissioners that don't believe in contract cities. And if somebody gets elected and says, hey, we should not be, one of the main municipal services, the services that cities should run is police. The county shouldn't be doing this and sending our officers here and there, all these mini states. So that is a major possibility. And I know there's been county commissioners, I remember Alex Ray back then and a couple of times, there are county commissioners who aren't big fans of contract cities. I mean, think about it. We're getting the entire menu of county services. We're getting an incredible deal, better services than the vast majority of cities out there. So there might be an elected sheriff who says, you know what, it's time to end this type of service. I mean, that can happen immediately. And we also saw what's happened politically in other areas, you know, when that becomes an issue just right down the street, you know, with elected sheriffs. But yeah, that is a major concern of mine, because depending on who gets elected, I mean, they can say, look, this service is over. I mean, it doesn't make sense for the county, you know. Because we do get, although it is expensive, we get an entire menu of services. We get the best service compared to everything. So that is one of my fears, is that you get one person that comes in, and it is a possibility, and they don't want to provide.
So, Mr. Manager, then when would be the appropriate time?
Well, in this agreement, we have contractually that they can't just walk out on us. So if this scenario that the mayor described does occur, where somebody gets elected to the office of sheriff and they do not want to provide contract services to other cities, then there's going to be, and I think it's 12 months. So it's not like something that's going to happen and you have 90 days or 60 days. It's going to be a significant amount of time that we have to be able to transition either to contracting services from another department or to establishing our own department.
Mayor, I think the person running the department's gonna be elected, but the county still holds the purse strings and all the other stuff. I think we're gonna be just like Broward, where the county still funds and the sheriff has to come looking for funding from the county. So it's gonna be very difficult for that person to say, you know, I'm gonna opt out of these contracts. I'm gonna, and the more departments that he contracts, Broward is a classic example of contract. They contract to everybody. I mean, there's about 15 cities that contract with Broward. So
Yeah, but I'll give it, Southwest Ranches opted out. They weren't providing a good service. Southwest Ranches went with Davy, and that's happening.
Yeah, it's something to look at. There's no doubting.
But I just wanted to put it out there,
No,
food for
you're
thought, 'cause
absolutely.
it is,
Coral Springs
it's
doing the same
germane to
thing.
the conversation, because the contract ends September of 2024, and the election is 2 months after that. So I just brought it up because it was germane to the discussion, you know, and it is a real possibility. Back to the main motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Item 13A. Councilmember Alvarez.
Yes.
Councilmember Dieguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Ruano.
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Collazo.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
yes.
And Mayor Sid.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We are on to new business items. 14A, Councilman Collazo.
I will be brief. We've been referencing special taxing districts by an acronym that some people find distasteful. The county has made changes to what they call special taxing districts. I believe they're called assessment districts now in their code. I was proposing that we either mimic the county or come up with a different name, such as neighborhood service districts. So I worked with staff. I think the consensus was that we wanted to make sure that we were consistent with the county. And I know while my memo speaks to neighborhood service districts, I'd like to move that we now refer to special taxing districts as assessment districts. Assessment districts.
Assessment districts.
Second by
Second.
Councilman Alvarez. I do have, A, I am in total agreement, we should rename it. B, I don't know if that's the name. I would like a more holistic process that we involve, you know, even the current assessment districts, just because when I talk to staff, when I talk to the manager today, I go, can we pick any name? Can we go, and I'm gonna follow up with a property appraiser, and I'll help push that through. But even, I don't know if you just wanna call the chairs maybe call a meeting with the chairs of each, and just come up, because maybe that's not, the name, but I agree with you. Let's change the name, but I would wanna do it in a holistic fashion where maybe it's not assessment districts, maybe it's,
We came up with neighborhood service districts because it was more accurate, or it depicted what we were doing in those areas. I personally prefer neighborhood service districts, but the feedback was to be legally consistent with the county. So my first option would be neighborhood service districts, and if it cannot be neighborhood service districts, I would, the option of assessment districts. Assessment districts.
Yeah, let me just, and Lorenzo will speak more intelligently about it, but it appears that the county, for operational purposes, functionally, they refer to them as assessment districts, but it doesn't appear that they've modified their ordinance, so the behind-the-scenes name for the county still remains as special taxing districts. So for all intents and purposes, and Lorenzo, verify this, it appears that we can really name it for functional purposes. For everyday use, we can probably call it whatever we want.
In that case, I would move with neighborhood service districts.
I'll second you on that.
so, I'm in favor of changing the name. I can't support it because I really believe in the holistic fashion. Let's go back to those, I know you go to all the meetings, let's go back to those committees, call the chairs, have them come up with a name. Maybe it's not that name. So, that's just my position, and I think it goes along with what I really believe they should kind of take that.
What I would like to do then, I would like to make that motion as follows, to rename the special taxing districts neighborhood service districts after meeting with the board chairs and getting their input.
I'll second that.
That's fine, but give them options. So if they come up with different ideas, you know what I mean? No, I don't want them to say, hey, this is what the council, no, look, what do you guys think? This is the name, what do you, I really believe in that holistic thing. We empower them just to make, just to make those decisions. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. We're on to item 14B, Vice Mayor. Am I correct? You brought this up before, right?
Yeah, this is just an addition to the previous ordinance that we passed. Some years ago, we talked about candy-flavored tobacco products, and now they're morphing into candy-flavored vaping and other names that they have for it. So I'd like to work with our legal department. I included in here a Miami Herald article on the epidemic of e-cigarettes and vaping and what's going on with our youth and how many deaths have occurred already from this vaping. Now, just so you know, they're called vaping, they're called juuling, and now there's one called Stig. And Stig is they're as small as a jump drive. And you don't even know that the kid has it. It's smokeless, and it's nicotine-based, it's disposable. It comes in a 4-pack, and they're just buying them everywhere. And it looks like a jump drive. If you look through their book bag, you won't even tell. And so, it's not considered smoking by the teens, and that's really what the epidemic is all about. A lot of the electronic ones are now being charged by the USB port. So all they do is unplug their phone cord, use the same charger, and plug in the charger for the Juuls. So I want to work with staff there's some stuff on the Miami Beach ordinance that we may not be able to enforce, but I'd like to get the permission from the council to work with the legal department on getting a ordinance out on this and restricting some of the advertising and stuff like that to these e-cigarettes and the candy-flavored cigarettes. I encourage you to Google all this stuff, especially the Stigs, because they're labeled as the name of the candy or the name of the flavor. It doesn't even say that it's a vaping device. So that's my motion, is to work with the legal department and the town manager to come up with a ordinance that would be appropriate for Miami Lakes.
Second.
Any discussion, council? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. We're on to the next new business item, which is Councilman Alvarez.
All right. So council, mayor, it's my understanding that our current agreement with Southern Strategies will end this fiscal year. I believe that Southern Strategies has provided inadequate services to our town by failing to assist us with necessary information regarding new legislation, failing to advocate our town's legislative priorities to representatives and senators alike, by failing to provide adequate communication to our governing body about the status of pending legislation. For instance, this past year, many meetings were canceled. Scheduling of meetings with legislative officials and with our lobbyists was difficult. Feedback on pending legislation was often cookie cutter and not relevant to the town's concerns. Instead, they were general Miami-Dade County matters. Issues that were of concern, such as the tree cutting statute, were not brought to the town's attention. Worst of all, a necessary infrastructure project was surprisingly vetoed by the governor, when we, on the other hand, were coming back to our residents, informing them that we were getting the funding. For all these reasons, I'd like my colleagues to consider supporting my motion to direct staff to begin development of a scope of lobbying services that will adequately ensure that our town receives the proper and necessary representation and advocacy in Tallahassee, and begin the procurement of a new lobbyist for our town.
I'll second it for discussion.
Vice Mayor.
Just a quick question through the mayor to the manager. Are we up, is it my understanding, or am I incorrect, that we extended the contract to go through this session with our lobbying firm?
Yeah, the original agreement that we were working on before was due to expire in December. So I exercised a few months ago. It's not anything recent. It was several months ago. I exercised my option to extend them through the end of March. And I'll tell you the logic or the rationale there. Number one is this is an early session this year, right? So throughout the whole fall is when the committee weeks are happening. The session is going to start mid-January and will go through mid-March. So at the time, I didn't think that it was, the timing was right to go through the process. My intent is to do exactly what Councilmember Alvarez is asking for, which is to once, obviously in anticipation, beforehand, not after March, but beforehand, is go through the process of an RFP process to put it out there, have it a competitive process, and then bring back to you the results of that competitive process with a recommendation on adopting a new lobbying contract starting April the 1st. Now, there's two things there. Number one is that through the austerity measures, we cut our half of our lobbying contract price. So what we have is funding for whether Southern Strategy or whoever. We have funding through the end of March. So if and when we award a new contract after April, then we'd have to identify additional funding to be able to fund that contract. But that was my game plan, to go through what Councilmember Alvarez is asking. So I don't know if we're in line with the same timing, or if he wanted to do this ahead of time. Committee weeks start this week, actually this month, and then we have, I think, 2 weeks of committees in October. We have, I think, another week in November. So I thought that my opinion was the timing wasn't right to make the replacement or the change now, but to go through a competitive process in the fall or maybe early into 2020 to be able to award a new contract to a new lobbying firm, or to the results of it doesn't have to be a new lobbying firm, but the results of the competitive process come back to you before the end of March to be able to make a recommendation and award a contract starting April the 1st. And then we'll work on identifying the funding.
Councilman Alvarez, do you want to start this look before committee weeks or before this session, or?
So I have a couple of questions, Manager. How lengthy is the procurement policy? The 30 days?
The RFP process is probably a 3-month process. So that's why I wasn't going to wait till 2020 to start it. I was going to start it at the end of 2019, so that we'll be able to award it in maybe January, February to the new vendor or to a lobbying firm, but to be effective starting April 1.
Council, I want to get your thoughts on this. So this current lobby firm already knows that we're going to bid this out again. In your humble opinion, do you think that they will provide the same level of service that we did not receive this upcoming legislative session? Because we're elected for 4 years. And if we don't bring any dollars back for infrastructure projects, which with the 3% we're in dire need to bring something to alleviate with those projects, do you all feel that that we're going to be represented at the level that we merit to be represented, that our residents merit to be represented, to bring some dollars back to our town? We didn't get the sidewalks. We didn't get the drainage in Royal Oaks. I mean, how do you not catch that? How do you not catch that before it getting vetoed? It passed the state, it passed the Senate, it got on the budget. How do you not catch that being vetoed by the governor? We had one thing get on the budget, and it got vetoed. So my question and my discussion with my colleagues is, Southern Strategies, knowing what they know as of today, do you think we will be represented at the level that we merit to be represented this upcoming legislative session?
Councilman Diegues.
I'll take a stab at answering your question, which, as many know, I usually don't have a problem with. But I'm not crazy about the level of service either. My thinking is, I remember requesting from the manager a breakdown of where our items stood at the end of the session, and I was expecting something that included a yes or no as to whether something passed, and kind of an assessment of what went wrong, what went right. And instead, we ended up with like an 114-page breakdown of every committee vote that was taken and every, final, I think it was first and second reading was included in there, like a whole mishmash of information we didn't need. Instead, I think in that sense, they blew the customer service experience. And I also think that, yes, I agree with you, I'm still perplexed as to how a project accidentally gets vetoed. But, so I definitely got my gripes. And I would say this, I'm inclined to go with the manager's position, not because I'm necessarily happy, but just because I do think that, I have faith in the subcontractor that they have, right? And I have faith in their ability that for the time being to help get us through the committee weeks and all that, and help us just, go through our regular process anyway and not leave us lobby less. I guess that's a term I'm coining. I think I'd rather kind of stay with them for now, let the process play out as the manager outlined, and just put my faith again in the subcontractor, who's really been the lobbyist in the last year and a half or more. So that's my 2 thoughts, or 2 cents.
Vice Mayor.
If I can just finish my thought, Councilman Alvarez, I completely agree with you. My frustration with them has been ongoing for 6 years. And the first year I didn't make it to Tallahassee because I had spent my money on emo classes. But when I showed up in Tallahassee, I had no idea who the lobbyist was. At that time, we had a different mayor, we had a different system where the mayor would not allow the council to talk to the lobbyist or have any contact because he was the point of governmental affairs. Fortunately, Mayor Slayton came in after that and opened the floodgates. Mayor Sid has done the same and allow us to communicate. But still, there's been a lack of service and customer care, regardless of what we're paying. Whether we cut it in half from $100,000 to $50,000, whatever it was that we were paying, you're still a customer, and you still deserve that right. And I had no idea the person that was touring us around was one of our lobbyists, and we had zero contact with him throughout the year. Scheduling meetings was a nightmare. Prior to you getting elected, it was the same thing. And as disappointed as you are, I am too. This last year, with the subcontractor that they brought in, it seemed to work out a lot better, and that's why I asked the manager, where are we? I think that you're going to see a better performance in this session and better information because they may want to bid on this again. And I think you applying pressure now is definitely the right time to apply pressure. Is it the right time to put it out for bid in the middle of the beginning of session and committees? I don't know. I would like to hear from the rest of the council on that to get there, but your frustrations, I'm equally with you. And trust me, I mean, you went to Tallahassee this year and you saw who was doing all the work. This council right here. This council right here. Although I've been told that days is not the day to go up and lobby. We should be going up during committee weeks, which comes back to having the proper budget. You know, like for example, I just can't dish out the money personally to go to Tallahassee on my own and travel for the town because my car insurance is higher than my mortgage. I have 3 teenage drivers. So, you know, I just don't have those resources. But at the end of the day, we have to look at the big picture of, is it the right time? And I'm truly frustrated with you. So I'll take the lead from the rest of the council, see that they went up and see how what their feedback is. But I just think it's tough in the middle. And just to top it off, I mean, you have to look at the big picture. Our state representative voted against our appropriations. So the person that represents us at the state of Florida in this district voted against our appropriations. That's insanity.
Well, I think the vice mayor hit on the head. I mean, we're as effective as our representatives, right? So on the appropriation level, I think where you see your advocates, your lobbyists is really on the policy side, amending policy, doing that. Look, I used to be an aide up there. Southern Strategies is very well connected up in Tallahassee. They have a lot of folks that they work with. They've helped us. I mean, and so has the new scenario that we have now with the subs. So at the end of the day, this is going to be competitively bid, which to me is a must. I agree with Councilman Dieguez. We are where we are right now. There's not enough time to bid this out. I don't know if there is or there is an emergency, but I think any move that we make has to get bidded properly. And just remember, food for thought also. We've lowered the cost to $24,000, right? So whoever bids for our contract, we won't. Unfortunately, this is something we probably won't be number one on their client list in Tallahassee. So it's really how hard we push, how hard we expect our expectations. So that it really falls on us to push strong. We can talk to our legislators all the time. I mean, we have great relationships in the legislature, but like we had several representatives from outside of Miami Lakes sponsoring our legislative priorities, and that was due to us setting up those meetings. But I think let the process play out. We are where we are today. I agree with the manager. I agree with Councilman Dieguez and even the vice mayor. We move forward. I have a feeling this is going to be a very successful session, and we'll go from there. But will that we'll be able to reanalyze. No, it's getting late already. Reanalyze the situation right after session, and that's when it gets bid out. To me, the most important part here is to make sure that it's competitively bid and that it's transparent, that it's a process that we all can be proud of. But I think this session will be a good session. So, but I'm okay where we're at right now in terms of let's do what the manager said and let's rebid it. I mean, that's where I'm at.
Mayor, I have a question for you, and maybe you can help. And Councilmember Dieguez made a comment that made me pensive and think. So if we awarded this contract to Southern Strategies, and some of you have made comments that we were more happy or more content with the level of service that we received from the subcontractor, does that give us the flexibility, since it was already awarded, since the subcontractor, I guess, is hired by the contractor, and they're the ones that won the bid, do we have the flexibility to use just a subcontractor?
So I think part of how procurement was set up back then was that there's a requirement of how many years does a subcontractor have lobbying up in Tallahassee? And I think we have a requirement of experience in terms of they can subcontract whoever they want, but I know when we had bid it out, when staff put it out, was they had certain requirements that the committee met, and maybe Tony, who's in the back, he can shed some light on that, because I know he's been on several of those committees in the past. But listen, I don't know. You want to shed some light on that, Mr. Manager, because I really don't want to get into a position where we're doing something that is not within the purview of our procurement.
Yeah, obviously, from our perspective, I recommend that if we were to make a change, whether it's now or for April 1st, that always happens in a competitive environment. So I believe that the timeline that I laid out for you is the best timeline right now. And I guess to go to Councilmember Alvarez's concern, and I'll use a sports analogy, and I know everybody up here is a sports fan, except for Councilmember Ruano, I guess. But you always hear when professional players are in that contract year, they get in better shape, they work out, they get a trainer, they play better, and with the anticipation that it's coming up. And in my discussions with Southern Strategies, they know that that our process is always a competitive process. So they knew, by assumption, and then I confirmed it when we had a discussion, that they knew that after March the 31st, that it was going to be a competitive process. So to your concern about whether they're going to really, pull their weight in Tallahassee and work for us, I believe that just having this item on the agenda may be a prompt to get them light a fire, and also the fact that they're going to be fighting for their competitive advantage in the next competitive process. So I believe that we're not going to be behind the eight ball with regard to whether they're going to fight for us or not. I believe that the nature of the fact that their contract was only extended through March, I could have extended them up to a year. I had that ability. I only extended them through the end of session. And I confirmed to them, and they already assumed it, that we were going to go through a competitive process to award a new contract. So to your concern, obviously anything can happen, right? But I believe, my gut tells me that they're going to be working with that frame of mind that they got to perform or overperform to be in a better position to compete for the new contract that will be awarded after April.
So, and and just to clarify the question, yes, can the council make a change like that? Yeah, we have that purview. Is staff recommending completely against us going down that path? Of course, we have to go through the bid process. That way, you know what I mean? We always protect the people's interests in that fashion. So, but at the end of the day, yeah, the council has in the past, years before too, waived bid processes, done, changed contracts. But that is something that I've always seen staff always tell us, look, let's make sure that the people's interest is protected and transparent.
I anticipate for the council to be able to meet with the lieutenant governor this year. So I hope that's something that Southern Strategies can make available to us as it wasn't last year.
Look, I know, I'll give you an example. I know the manager hasn't been very happy recently because we've been asking for a meeting with the governor for 2 months already since it got vetoed. We immediately asked for a meeting to hear it directly from the governor as to what happened. So I know that's still in the works. Councilman Alvarez, you have a motion and a second on the table.
Yeah, I'm fine with giving the manager the direction to proceed the procurement after this legislative session.
Madam Clerk, what was the original motion, just to clarify for the council?
The motion was to get support from from all of you to direct the staff to begin the development of a scope for an RFP, and that he was very dissatisfied with Southern Strategies on how they had been working the last year. So he wanted the support from staff to see if the lobbying services could go through a RFP.
But to be clear then, that this is an amendment now, what he's saying now, that he's amending his motion.
Right. My original new business item does not have a timeline. It just says to begin the procurement of a new lobbyist for our town. The manager has given us direction that it takes 90 days for a procurement process, which would put us well into past the committee weeks and going into the legislative session that starts in January. And after following his advice, then we'll begin the procurement policy after this legislative session. And I'm sure Councilmember Collazo and I and the rest of the council will spearhead our efforts this session, and along with the mayor and your leadership and the vice mayor, spearhead our efforts, and Councilwoman Ruano and Jeff and Councilmember Dieguez spearhead our efforts to make sure that we're heard and that we can bring some dollars back to our town for infrastructure projects or whatever legislative priorities the mayor and the manager decide upon.
I will second his amendment to begin the procurement process following session.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, we're back onto the main motion as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Thank you, Councilman Alvarez. The golf cart friendly zones, that has been addressed already. Councilman Collazo, I need a motion for the next item, which is 14F. It requires a waiver of the special rules of order.
Motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. So this issue was brought to my attention while we were putting up shutters around town. One of the houses, I know Councilman Collazo was working hard on. He was out there working hard, and a bunch of the council members. I had one gentleman pull me to the side, and he mentioned to me, he said that he was Richard Wester. And he told me that he was one of two Purple Heart veterans here in the town of Miami Lakes, and he said, look, I'd love to make sure that we co-designate that spot for all veterans. He goes, because I'm not at town hall often, neither is the other gentleman who's a Purple Heart, so I would love to see that designation for everybody in this town. You know, he told me to do this, so he asked, can you put it on the agenda? So I mentioned his name, and you know, he asked that we could do it. So I just want to make a motion to co-designate our Purple Heart parking space as also a veteran parking space.
I'll second.
Vice Mayor.
Can we go one step further and make it not just veteran, but active duty as well, or?
Who?
Make it for military service type parking? I mean, our town is growing, the same space, but our town is growing with, more military folks. Southcom has been looking. I don't know if that's a possibility. I'm all in favor of this. I just, want to make sure that active duty too, I mean, it's important that we do something like that, but just, I don't know if that's a possibility. Maybe think about it and let me know.
Yeah. Oh, we could definitely address. We could definitely look into that. We'll look into that for sure. No, that manager has sufficient direction. So, Yeah, because the sign will have all the branches of the military, so,
Excellent.
yeah, and that was at the request of Mr. Richard West.
And Madam Clerk, I'd like to,
He called
the
me.
record to
It is
reflect that
true.
I'm a co-sponsor.
I would like to be added to as a co-sponsor as well, since I was physically there, but too busy putting up shutters.
Full disclosure, Councilman Collazo was putting up those shutters, and then that's when Richard called me outside, and he wanted to talk to me one-on-one. So, yeah, and he was putting up those shutters, so.
I'd like to co-sponsor as well. I was putting shutters somewhere else, but I'll
Not to be
co-sponsor.
left out, I think we should just add everybody, even
Exactly.
Councilwoman
Yes, I
Morano's
think-
not here, I think we
So
should just
everyone is co-sponsoring.
make it a unanimous co-sponsorship.
I think it's, yeah. I
That's
agree.
fine. All those, that's fine. Everybody co-sponsors it. We'll address it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. And when we do that, I love for the one that presents it be Richard, since he's the one. This is the idea. Yeah, it'll be cool if he kind of, because he was like so thoughtful about it. He was like, man, I really want to honor everybody because there's only two of us in the town. So it's his event, and we'll go forward like that. We're on to the next item, which is Councilman Collazo's 14G.
So this item has one that I think we have all received some type of feedback in one shape or another, whether you're tracking social media or you're experiencing this on a first-hand basis. The Palmetto Express lanes, I don't know if they're performing at the optimal range that they were designed for. I do know that I've received a lot of anecdotal feedback, not necessarily in favor of the express lanes. I had an opportunity to meet with our traffic planner, and during that meeting with her, she did say that there may be opportunities where there can be some lining or realigning or reshifting of how those express lanes, at least the approaches to the express lanes, to even add an on-ramp to 154. So being that the express lanes, at least in my perception and anecdotally, some people have given me feedback that they're not performing as expected. I wanted to see if we could start having a conversation with FDOT to see if that entrance at 154 can be realigned similarly to how the entrance at I-95 and the Golden Glades interchange could be realigned to allow people to get onto that express lane project with some ease. So I wanted to make a motion for us to have reach out to FDOT and see if the express lanes can be removed altogether, and if they cannot be removed altogether, at least for there to be the entry point at 154th Street.
Second.
Mayor?
I'd like to say something.
Yeah.
Councilman Rodriguez and the Vice Mayor.
So, Councilman Collazo, I understand the issue, but let me share something that I heard from a resident, which is after the implementation of the express lanes, traffic on 154th has actually improved because their theory is that everyone north, instead of coming down to 154th to get the Palmetto, is going to 67th Avenue to get the Palmetto and take the express lanes that way. So they've seen an increase in traffic flow on 154th since the implementation of the express lanes. So initially when I saw the item, but then I asked some residents that live in the area, and they advised me that they've actually seen an increase in traffic flow, that it's benefited. And I think it's only going to get better once the entire Palmetto, redesign is done, and we have the Texas U-turn at 67th. So I think it's an uphill battle. What we're trying to do with FDOT, I don't think they're going to be changing anything anytime soon. But in my conversations with residents in that area, they've actually seen an increase in traffic flow.
No, listen, the lanes were promised to us from DOT 4 years ago when I attended those meetings with DOT, was that they were going to take one lane. In some areas, they've taken up to 3 lanes. When you do this on and off switch, they eat up 3 lanes. And we have the Coca-Cola effect. Right now, we go from 3 to 4 to 3 back to 4. So the lanes are a problem. I think they need a little bit of realignment, and maybe just stick to the one lane that they promised us that they were going to take for the express lane, because in some areas, like I said, it takes up to 3 lanes. I think the Palmetto construction is going to add another dynamic nightmare to the Palmetto with these lanes. I think the express lanes were prematurely done prior to construction, and that's going to be an issue. Although I agree with Councilman Rodriguez, there's less traffic on the Palmetto, at least southbound at certain times. In the morning, I think it's still a nightmare. Our flow has gotten better in the area because, like you said, more people are cutting around to get the express, and they're taking 169th and going around the back. And I've seen that. But southbound Palmetto is still a mess. It's just a little bit easier for us to get on. And Miami Lakes Drive has been smoother east-west. But even when I attended the town hall meeting for people on the west side of I-75, their complaint was wherever they got on, if they got on 103rd, they still couldn't get on the express lanes. And they found that was an issue. But I think that we were promised, or we were told that they were going to take one lane. They've taken up to 3 lanes in certain areas, and it needs to be evaluated and maybe even removed until the construction is done. So, I mean, I'm in support of talking to DOT and reevaluating it. I don't know if your intent was to send up a resolution, or do you want to just start some discussions and seeing, what can be done. But I think that there's certain times where the Palmetto is flowing great because the express lanes are in. And Miami Lakes Drive is flowing great because, the express, people are going more towards the express lanes. But I think it's something that we need to look at the science, and we need to look at where we're at.
So the one thing that I've noticed, and I drive 154 every single morning, so it's increased the capacity to get on. So that on-ramp, you see it flowing. The first 3 weeks of school in that west has really flowed really well. And it's increased people's capacity to get on from 154 onto I-75 and the Granny. The biggest issue is when they hit closer to 103rd from 122nd, those Hialeah exits, it's jam-packed there in the morning. But I know our town lieutenant has been reporting back to the major and to our town manager the last 3 weeks. I had a conversation with the manager today. He goes, look, he's been sending me pictures and analyzing the traffic flow. I just wanted our town manager or the major to share with you all the findings of our traffic whisperer who couldn't be here tonight. Mr. Manager?
Yeah, I'll let the major do the specifics on it, but what I can tell you is, and I think this is what happened, and I may be wrong. It wouldn't be the first time that I'm wrong. My wife tells me I'm wrong all the time. But I believe the express lanes got a bad rap before they had opened up the I-75 express lane flyover to the Palmetto express lane flyover. When this whole thing happened, and it was crazy, right? When they started installing the express lane markers, it was really bad because all of the entire flow of I-75 was still merging in at 122. So they told us, be patient, give us a couple weeks, let us finish installing these express lane markers. We're about to open up the flyover. Then the flyover got a little delayed because of weather. It was a time when it was raining all the time, so they had and I kept sending it to you guys, they had 2 or 3 deadlines that they kept pushing. But when they finally opened up, which thankfully was before the start of school, when they finally opened up the I-75 to express lane flyover to the Palmetto express lanes, all of those cars that were coming in from 75 and merging into the general purpose lanes at 122 now are going directly into express lanes. So the merging of cars from the regular general purpose I-75 lanes into the Palmetto is dramatically reduced. What has that caused? And I saw it, I've seen it twice. Not that I go in that route every day, but I've had to do it since the start of school. I've had to do it twice for 2 doctor's appointments, and I've gotten on with no backup on the on-ramp, get right onto the Palmetto, and this is, I think one day I had to go at 8 a.m., the other time around 8:30, and both times, yes, there was some backup in the area of 122 to about 103 towards Okeechobee, but as soon as, and it was backed up but flowing, slow but flowing. took me 5 or 10 minutes to get through that stretch, and then it was smooth sailing all the way through. So I believe that they got a bad rap, and I'll let the major talk about the field experience that Lieutenant Gonzalez has seen, and the information that he's provided, that the time from on 154th has been dramatically improved, and I don't want to steal his thunder, so go ahead, Major.
There we go. You've pretty much said it all. We're noticing our travel time. It's been diminished to about 4 to 5 minutes from driving down 154th Street during its peak hours. It looks like what's occurring is that a lot of the traffic is currently utilizing the express lane that's going southbound. Now, just to keep in mind that lane is currently, I believe they're not charging anything. It's still, there's still this trial period, and we're still waiting to see exactly how it goes. So it's a wait and see approach to see once they start charging, there'll be another period of adjustment, and then hopefully things will continue the way they're going now. But we've seen traffic flowing onto 154th Street a lot more fluid since school started in the past several weeks. One of the major problems that we have in eastbound traffic on Northwest 154th Street is, of course, when the cars are about to get onto the Palmetto Expressway, a traffic accident on the Palmetto, it blocks up that lane, and that's usually what starts to block up traffic heading eastbound on 154th Street. Because of this new system, you've gotten some accidents, but the accidents are occurring at the express lane, and they occurred at the inception of this. As time has gone on, you used to see all that, all the traffic debris right at the beginning of the express lane. Now you're not seeing that anymore. It looks like people are getting used to it, and it's flowing a bit more smoothly. In terms of, just on a side note, in terms of northbound traffic, we're also seeing some improvement on what's getting off of 154th Street off of the northbound exit, because of the fact that when you get in the express lane back on the Palmetto, you are committing yourself to getting off and going to 67th Avenue. And so whereas before, when I'm driving southbound on the Palmetto, I'm like, well, 154 looks back up, I'll head to 67th Avenue. Now you have to make that decision way beforehand and get on the express lane. So a lot of people are doing that, committing so that they bypass all that traffic and get off at 67. So we're seeing an improvement there as well.
So I still have the floor. I'll pass it over to whoever else wants to speak. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the express lanes. I'm not a fan of not having that entrance on 154. I know when the Texas U-turn and the underpass and all that comes into play, that's part of the whole system. But we have seen in the first 3 weeks of school the improvement on 154. So I don't know what the answer is, Councilman Collazo. I don't know how to, because it is we're all on an anecdotal basis. I don't know what else we can do to improve the flow, which I know it's working. If there's any other alternatives, I'm more than into to talk to FDOT, sit down with them, and find alternatives to improve. Let me go through the first round and see if there's anyone else want to speak on this issue. Councilman Collazo, you spoke on this, Councilman Alvarez. Councilman Alvarez.
Perhaps, Councilmember Collazo, we can provide direction to Southern Strategies to set up a meeting with FDOT. After the one with the lieutenant governor set up.
I appreciate everybody's feedback, and the manager did mention the issue of the unintended consequence, right? He said, well, if we actually shift the on-ramp and make it available, are we going to be inviting more traffic onto 154? But I would tell you, the reason that we're seeing 154 utilized less is because we've made it so miserable. The reality is not that we've improved the situation, it's just the express lanes have made it so much worse that people have avoided it. And people are using other arteries, 87th Avenue, 67th Avenue, and you would see the amount of creativity that's being used right now. But we've basically just made it so much worse. Not we, but it's just become so unbearable that people are using alternative routes, which actually maybe the intended consequences is that we've made then traffic flow on 154 better. My suggestion is, in responding to everybody's feedback, is can we shift that exit a little bit further on without necessarily having an adverse impact on 154? Can it work? Can it work like it does at the Golden Glades interchange? Can we provide that option to our residents? Because I believe the more mobility options that we offer them, the better. Saturday night, I had to go to an event that conflicted with the Marlins night, but you guys all know the big fan that I am of FIU, right? I made the horrible mistake of not getting on the express lane at 67th Avenue. On Saturday, low traffic, completely backed up, yet the two express lanes completely void of anything. So I just want to bring those options and those opportunities that make life a little bit better for our residents and just explore that opportunity with FDOT. I agree with Councilman Rodriguez. I think it's a heavy lift, right? I believe that there's people that know a lot more about traffic flow than we do, but I just wanted to see if there was that opportunity up until at least that point that Texas U-turn is installed and makes that option a little bit easier for us to navigate. And that was my ask, was just to see if we had that opportunity to have that discussion with FDOT.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, Councilman Rodriguez.
I'll tell you what, I'm actually not in favor of the express lanes at all. I think these roads are roads that were already paid for by taxpayers. They shouldn't have to pay more money to get into a luxury lane. But unfortunately, we don't control that. But I think we could definitely have the conversation with FDOT, let them know how we feel. But as it is right now, I think